Okay, and I will do the share screen. Yep. Okay, welcome everybody. This is the second talk on China today in 2024 first term. Now, last Monday, we talked about the trade war between China and United States. Today, we'll talk about the technology war between China and United States. As usual, I will start with a little bit of background information first, and then we'll proceed from there. Trade. Oh, I should change that to technology war. Maybe I just change it right now. Is technology war. Oh, spelling mistake. Okay, technology war. Okay, what's technology war? Ah, oh, I was correct. Come on, go back. Um, uh, let's review the trade war first before we proceed into the technology war. So we are looking at the trade balance. Remember, the excuse for trade war is the um, trade deficit of United States against China. But in other words, it is the trade surplus of China against the United States. The trade war started in about 2018. So let's look at 2019. 2019, it increased by 45%, the trade balance. That means the surplus. And then in 2020, it increased by 167%, another big increase. And then 2020, we know 2020 is a special year. It is the year of COVID. So everything almost stopped. Even that, the trade balance still increased by almost 30%. And then the latest data I have is on 2022. And on 2022, it increased by another 25% against 2021. So we see that the trade balance actually increased rather than decrease. That means the trade war doesn't work in a sense. But again, here's the data. And again, this data is against GDP. So what we are more interested in is actually the upper graph. As indicated, the trade surplus actually increased, whereas the surplus decreased from 2015 to 2018. And then under trade war is actually increased. But if you look at the trade volumes, then we can differentiate between different kinds of trade. Here we have the red at the bottom, which is the items related to list 1, 2, and 3. This has 25% tariffs. Yes, they decreased. You can see that from approximately January 2019, when the trade war started, a few months later, then it drops. But eventually, it started climbing up at around 2021, January. The next line there is the one with 7.5% tariff. This is the list 4A. Again, we see a decline at the beginning of the trade war, and then after that, it climbs up again. The next one, ROW, is rest of the world. This is the normal trading of United States with the rest of the world. They are all normalized to 100 at the beginning. So that's why they are on the same graph. Otherwise, they will be shifting all over the place. We see that, yes, during the approximately March 2020, the United States relationship with everybody else also decreased. And then by January 2021, it picked up again. So that is the same. And the one next up is the rest of the world on list 4A. Remember, United States put on a trade tariffs on aluminum and steel. So that had a little bit of decrease and then climbed up again. And then for those without trade war, so that's this line. And again, the decrease is much less and then come out again. So 2020 is really a special year because that is the year of COVID. And finally is the tariff which have no trade tariffs, the red one, which almost go flat until it started climbing up again. So the United States trade deficit with almost every country is a systemic problem. It's not a isolated problem against China. It because it has the ability to print money. And when you can print money, you don't have to work very hard in order to earn money. So you can basically just print your currency and use the currency to go anywhere to buy whatever you want. That eliminate the motivation or the incentive to work hard in order to hey, am I recording? I had recorded. Okay. So that okay, let's continue. In different categories, then we can see the changes. Okay. The red line is China. The blue line is the rest of the world. Again, they are normalized to I think is certain time. So that's why the two curves are always uh, sitting together. And on the left-hand side, we actually see the actual volume. The actual volume, you see that China represents the largest volume by a very large margin. This is the laptop and monitors. Of course, the laptops and monitors, a lot of them are Western names like HP, Dell, and so forth. But they are considered import from China because they were assembled and made in China. Uh, telephones. Telephone is one of the key issue. And we see that the telephones with about 2020, the telephones dropped a bit. I will come to that today a little bit later on. But the rest of the world has been fluctuating as well. The Chinese portion is less, but you will see that South Korea is actually being squeezed out. We know there are some famous brands from South Korea, for example, Samsung, but they are being squeezed out. And we see a increase, quite significant increase from Vietnam because some of the phones are now assembled in Vietnam. Video games console, again, a lot of that has gone to Vietnam. Toys, again, Vietnam. So if you look at the rest of the world, we suddenly notice that Vietnam has been doing very well lately in the last, say, 6 years or 10 years. Vietnam is improving its position very rapidly. In a lot of the traditional Chinese area, you notice that most of the gain of Vietnam is from China. Let's go back a few slides. Laptop, Vietnam is almost nothing. China maintains its leadership. In terms of mobile, Vietnam is growing, China is dropping. In terms of video games, almost all the gains is by Vietnam from China. Toys, again, almost got that from China. Uh, you may ask question, why? Well, because many of the Chinese manufacturers started to move their manufacturing to cheaper region, just like the US companies trying to move their production to area of cheaper areas. So Vietnam is one of the target area where the Chinese business try to move their production to. A lot of people say, well, why don't they move to India? Well, India, both the legal environment as well as the language environment and cultural environment is not as close to China as Vietnam. Um, Vietnam have been for a long time part of China. Of course, later they became independent, but for many dynasties, Vietnam is actually part of China. So there's a lot of similar cultures in Vietnam and China, and moving manufacturing to Vietnam is much easier. Here, selected IT products. Again, China is dropping and mainly picked up by Taiwan and the rest of the world. Mexico remains almost the same, not much change, but Taiwan and rest of the world pick up quite a bit from the loss from China. Auto parts, almost not much change, but China still have a little bit of drop. Furniture, again, you see the growth part is in Vietnam and the rest of the world. Mexico, almost no change. Canada, no change. All the losses come from the market share of China. Semiconductor, a very interesting area, which we will focus on later today. You see that, again, there was a loss of semiconductor ability from China, but it has now picked up. And I would expect that pickup will increase very significantly in the next couple of years because of what of the dynamics that is the result of the technology war. We'll go to that a little bit later on. So let's look at some of the backgrounds. Trade war. Now, Biden inherited the trade wars from the previous US president, Donald Trump. The trade war itself, the trade conflict itself, has included technology restriction in its very early days. The main method of doing that is put the important companies, the Chinese companies, technology companies, into something called US Entity List. When your company is on that list, then any export from US to this company have to get a permit from the US Department of Commerce, putting a large hindrance to free trade. And of course, not all the permits are approved. So there's a lot of permits which are not approved, meaning the products from high technologies will not be able to sell to China if that company is on the entity list. Later on, when we go through the actual chronology of the technology war, you will notice that during the Trump times, the chronology is mainly on putting on tariffs. But during the Biden time, you will notice it is mostly putting companies into this entity list. With this measure, the US administration has the objective to prevent technology using US technology by the Chinese company in its goods and services. So it's basically is a technology war rather than a trade war in that sense. Up to 2020 August, this ban circumvent through multiple extensions granted Huawei, one of the key technology company in China, and through different loopholes. But these loopholes has stopped. Biden's almost first act is to stop this loophole so that forcing Huawei almost immediately stopping selling its flagship mobile phones. And that's why when we look at the phones, China lost quite a bit because this putting Huawei on the entity list limited Huawei's ability to get the uh, integrated circuits it requires in its mobile phones. And therefore, Huawei's mobile phone business almost collapsed. Now, before Huawei get into the entity list, it is almost ready to take the second spot in the world's largest manufacturer of mobile phones. It is just behind Samsung. But with that entity list, Huawei drop off, and then the market share of Huawei in China was shared by other phone makers in China. And that market doesn't really go to Samsung. So Samsung is in a very bad situation. If Samsung had taken up the market share um, lead, left out by Huawei, it will have a much larger share. But unfortunately, that share wasn't taken up by Samsung. And by now, Samsung has basically left the China market. In China, you want to buy a Samsung, it's very difficult. But if you want to get Samsung phones, uh, you can go to Hong Kong. Samsung had pushed a lot of its sales to Hong Kong, and then via Hong Kong, some of the Samsung phones do go back to mainland China. The excuse again is that the Chinese firms require US firms to transfer its intellectual property through joint venture. That's the first excuse in terms of intellectual properties. The second is the Chinese firms have received a lot of government aid from China, whereas US firms does not. Again, this is false. We know that all government support innovations through different programs, including us as well in Australia. And this so-called innovation grants, whatever, is the government support to innovation. So is China. It's nothing special, but there's always can be an excuse. The third is about business model, and the U.S. accused China copying the U.S. Business model. For example, we have eBay. The equivalent is Taobao or Alibaba. So the U.S. accused Alibaba copying eBay's business model. In a sense, yes, and in a sense, no. Alibaba's success, of course, stemmed from the ability of selling anything online. So is eBay. eBay is a auction-based business platform, initially at least. So if you want to sell something, you put it up, and then there will be a certain date. And then before that date, people can bid for it until um, up to that particular time. And then you sold your product at that time. So it was an auction-based platform. But obviously, people find that we don't have all the time tracking all the bidding. So people started to put up is a buy now option. That means, okay, I'm selling at this price. And if go back to the same model. Alibaba never used this auction model. It has always been a fixed price at the very beginning. So you can say they are the same business model. Another difference in terms of eBay and Alibaba is eBay's vendors will have to take care of the delivery themselves, whereas Alibaba actually help with the delivery. Alibaba cooperated with local transport last mile delivery guys and do the delivery. And today, of course, this last mile delivery is very much a booming business. Um, I was in Hong Kong in December and January, basically two months, and I have been during that 2 months visit Shenzhen multiple times. I think I have been to Shenzhen about 10 times during that 2 months. Uh, many of those times I'm with my relatives, and we go to a shopping mall, uh, have a lunch or a dinner. Then after that, we want to have some drinks, for example, some desserts. Like in here, if you are in a restaurant and you take food from other places and consume the food in the restaurant, it is not allowed. It's not allowed. You are not allowed to take food from one restaurant and then go to the other restaurant and eat it there. The restaurants basically serve only its food. Food in is catering area. In China, there's no such rule. You can always order anything from anybody else and consume it in any restaurant you like. There's no restriction. And so the last mile, that means you, when we sit down, order something from the restaurant, and then we'll go online and search for other things. For example, this restaurant doesn't offer a lot of street drinks. Then we will go online, search for other street drinks, and then order that. And then the delivery guy will take the food, come to your restaurant, and actually go into the restaurant and put it onto your desk by providing the delivery guy the table number, and that will come directly to your table. Very efficient last mile. Basically, these guys will arrive within 10 minutes when that thing is ready. It's all local, all very efficient. That is different. So in terms of stealing business practices or business information, actually China is innovating very heavily in terms of business practice. For example, in China, you won't have thieves or robber because there's no point. People doesn't carry any cash anymore, and they don't carry credit cards. There's only one cell phone, and that's it. They can do everything on the cell phone. They pay using um, similar to Apple Pay or Google Pay, but in China you use Alipay or Weibao Pay. Okay, so you have a different payment system, and you can also receive money very easily just using your mobile phone. And when you want to send money or receive money, the app will generate a QR code. The other party scan the code, and then the transaction is done. Real time, very fast. All this depends on a precondition. That condition is there is a good network. Transactions are in real time because China runs a very efficient 5G network. Now, China's size, geographic size, is about the same as United States. But in terms of 5G towers, the connection points, it has about 6 times more connection points than United States. And that's a big difference in terms of communication in China. Moving on. So we understand that the true motivation behind the conflict is actually deeper. China's technological rise and the threat it poses to US dominance. As was the case with basic manufacturing goods, China is making significant headway in the ICT sector, the information communication technology sector, a sector that is seen as a key to new industrial revolution we are entering. We are, we are entering the so-called Industrial Revolution 4.0, in, whereby artificial intelligence, communications, etc., will all integrate together in order to provide a much more refined production ability. For instance, in just over 20 years, Huawei has gone from being a local company into a world leader in ICT equipment. In particular, the mobile sales overtook Apple in 2018 and most recently Samsung in 2020 with 55 million devices sold in the second quarter of 2020. Now remember, that is 4 years ago. That is the information at the beginning of Biden's administration. We can see that Huawei is taking over. But again, the Huawei had to stop because of the technology limitations. And then, of course, just last year, Huawei announced its latest flagship mobile phone, the Mate 60 Pro. I will come to that a little bit later on. In terms of global sales of IT equipment, you see Huawei is forging ahead. By 2019, it has dominated all the other business, such as Nokia, Ericsson. ZTE is another Chinese company, and then Cisco. Cisco is, of course, a US company. Nokia and Ericsson are European companies. Here is a book written by a US political scientist, Graham Allison. The title is Destined for War. Can America and China escape the Thucydides trap? Its underpinning concept, the main theme is that when there is a rising power, the existing power will try to kill off the rising power in order to protect its dominance. And therefore, the United States, seeing China's rising, will use whatever means it is possible to stop the Chinese rising. And basing on a lot of past cases, here it quoted 16. And out of that 16 cases, 12 resulted in a war between the rising power and the ruling power at the time. So the big question is, as China rises, will there be a war between United States and China? Now, the situation here is very different from the 16 cases, because the 16 cases are cases using from Europe. But we are now talking about a global power. It's not a local power. So that's one main difference. The second main difference is in the previous 16 cases, the war is not destructive in the sense of destroying all humanity. But if there is a war between United States and China, it might be a war of destruction for whole humanity. So it is on a very different scale. Of course, there are criticism. For example, another one called James Palmer, an editor of Foreign Policy, a U.S. magazine, wrote, "Oh God, not the Peloponnesian War again. That was a war between uh, city-states in the backwater Eurasia 2004, 2,400 years ago. This is an unreliable guide to modern geopolitics." Another one, Lawrence Friedman, also argued the case studies deployed by Ellison comes from times when the issues of war and power were viewed differently than they are today. Today, we look at the geopower, the politics, quite different because at those times, the geopolitical force is almost at the rim of the leader, the emperor. The emperor want to fight, then the country commit uh, to war. Today, I hope it is not the case. I hope there are sensible voices which can limit the personal ambition or personal aggression of any leader. We also have to look that the Chinese rise, at least this time, um, since the reform opening, is peaceful. China hasn't entered into war with anybody since its rise. Maybe they will say, okay, after the Second World War, China have participated in the Korean War, in the we had a war between China and India, a short one, a few weeks, and then another commitment into Vietnam War. Yes, but after that, when China started opening, China haven't started any war. No, zero. Okay. Yes, there are some skirmishes between China and India, but they are just fixed fight. No weapons were used. Okay, no hot weapon is used. They are using cups and sticks and fighting each other. Yes, and of course there are casualties as well, but they are basically fist fights in the border, and they are usually very minor. And then after a few weeks, then both sides retreat and then have a talk and then go back to normal. And again, except India, China land borders are all secure in the sense that it has agreement with its land labors. All land labors are now settled. Of course, except India, a little bit of skirmish in a few areas near the south coast, south side of the Himalaya. But other than that, basically China's border are now secure. Of course, there is also a maritime border about the South China Sea. That is interesting. We will talk about that a bit later on. When I say the border is secure, look at this map. This is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Around China, except Thailand, all the border countries are members of the Shanghai Cooperation. Oh, maybe except North Korea. North Korea, and then there's a little bit of gray area in between the Himalayas. That is the Nepal. Other than that, everybody it has a good relationship. Even Vietnam, Vietnam is upcoming dialogue partners, the yellow part. China's borders are secure. Now we have to, when we talk about technology war, we have to mention some previous history, some previous case. This is a case of a European company, actually a French company, and the main character in that event had wrote a book, and then it was translated into English, The American Trap, and then later on translated into Chinese. And that book was on the table of Huawei's chairman. When everybody visit him, he mentioned that. So what is this American Trap? Um, this story unpacks how the United States is using corporate law as an economic weapon against its own allies. We notice that its own allies, France, one after the other. Some of the world's largest companies are being actively destabilized to the benefit of the US in acts of economic sabotage that seem to be the beginning of what's to come. Okay, real details. We know that France has very good nuclear power technology. Its nuclear power technology is almost everywhere, including China. The first nuclear power plant in China was built by the, the French. So its key company is Alstom. Alstom is a technology company specializing in the gas turbines driven by nuclear power. One of his executive, I don't know how to pronounce his word, probably is wrong. Uh, Pierre or whatever. Okay. His story goes to the core. In April 2013, he was arrested in New York by FBI, accusing him of bribery, not in United States, but in Indonesia, not in United States. What now? Look, nuclear power plants installations is a government level activity. There's no individual buyer say, I want to buy a nuclear power plant, and therefore you come and talk to me, and then I will buy a power plant. No, it doesn't work that way. Nuclear power plants are major infrastructure. So as the senior executive of a company which focus on selling nuclear power plants, what do you do? Of course, you will meet with government officials. You will try to uh, convince the officials with your company's advantages and so forth. After these official meetings, many of the times they will gather together, have a dinner, have a drink. Normal practice, normal business practice. But if that after meeting gatherings are paid for by that senior executive, then it is labeled as bribery because you are giving incentives to a government's officials in order to convince them to buy your product, right? And he was accused of that during a meeting in Singapore in a upscale restaurant where he met some Indonesian politicians, have a good meal, have a good dinner. And he was put into maximum security prison. And eventually, he was released only after Armstrong agreed to sell his gas turbine business to GE, to General Electric, the largest American competitors. The American government is using its government effort to benefit its individual American company. That is the whole story of the book, The American Trap. You are welcome to find that book. This book is pretty easy to read, not that difficult. Now we have the case for a French company, Alstom. Now we have the same case for Huawei. Meng Wanzhou is the daughter of its founding chairman, Mr. Yam. Why Mr. Yam daughter is not Yam Weizhou, is Meng Wanzhou? In China, we have this called come in son-in-law. Okay. So usually when we marry, the bride go to the boy's house and take on the husband's surname. And the son and daughter also take on the father's surname. But when you have a incoming son-in-law, then the son and daughter take on the mother's surname. And that's why Meng Wanzhou is surname is Meng rather than Yam. Okay. Meng Wanzhou is this Huawei's founder's daughter. She's very capable, and she became the financial controller or the director of finance of Huawei. On a trip to Mexico, and she have to change over in an airport in, I think it's Vancouver. The Canadian official arrested her on the request of the United States, claiming that Huawei has a subsidiary doing business with Iran. Iran is under sanction by United States. So Huawei is accused of breaking the US sanction. Now, Huawei is a Chinese company. It is not a United States company. And it has no IPO. That means its stock is not on the any stock exchange. It is a wholly private company, a completely Chinese company. China doesn't have this technology ban against Iran. So a Chinese company under Chinese law do business with a country where the Chinese doesn't ban is perfectly legal, right? But United States, no, I sanction Iran. Everybody must follow me. And the excuse is during the presentation by Meng Wanzhou, there is a few slides in the PowerPoint which doesn't properly acknowledge the relationship of that company with the bank, Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank. Unfortunately, that piece of evidence is fraudulent. Later evidence show that the so-called missing slides was actually there. But anyway, Meng Wanzhou was being detained under house arrest for almost 3 years in Canada. And of course, that make the relationship between China and Canada very bad. And that is a exact case of the American trap. What the American want to do is to grab the technology of Huawei by, again, limiting the freedom of its senior executives. Mao Wanzhou, their director of finance. But eventually, in 2021, then Mao Wanzhou and the DOJ, Department of Justice, the United States, not in America, not in Canada. Although Mao Wanzhou is house arrest in Vancouver, the deal is struck between Huawei or Mao Wanzhou against the Department of Justice of United States. That's why I call Canada a vassal of United States. You have no sovereignty. You do something against your own national interest on behalf of another country. Would that arrest the relationship between Canada and China go to almost ice cold? For whose benefit? Obviously not for Canada's benefit. It's for United States benefit. So whatever you call it, I call Canada a vassal state of United States. Anyway, she was released, and then bought a Air China flight back to China, accompanied by the ambassadors to Canada, the Chinese ambassador to Canada. Why? Well, I was scratching my head. Why? Why a technology company's senior executive? Okay, she has money, so she can charter the whole flight. That's fine. I totally agree. She can charter the whole flight. But why the Chinese ambassador to Canada has to come back with her? Why? Do you know during that time, the Chinese military is in uh, alert level 2. The normal alert level is level 1. It raises alert level. The Chinese government doesn't trust the US, and maybe this plane might be kidnapped. So they put an ambassador on the plane to accompany Miss Meng back to China. Until her plane landed in Shenzhen, the alert is removed. Go back to the alert level 1. That says something about the relationship at that time. Very bad, actually. Okay, let's look at some of the history. The International Space Station. It's called international, but there's one country never on it, China. 2007, China indicated, yes, we like to join. This is called international. We want to join. And ESA, European Space Agency, in 2010 say, yes, we welcome them as well. But one country against it, US, fearing that the technology of the International Space Station might be leaked to China. Although Russia is an important member of the International Space Station. So America isn't afraid of technology leaking to Russia, but afraid the technology might leak to China. But anyway, China has now its own space station. And what is funny is that the NASA, the United States, say Chinese space station is not up to international standard because all the interface, the software interface on the space station are in Chinese, not in English. Of course, it is not up to international standard. It is up to Chinese standard, and therefore it is in Chinese manual. And you want to participate in China's space program, learn Mandarin. And it also limits the technology transfer. It it also limits the normal communication between NASA and the Chinese Space Station agency by legislation. One of the American politicians put in a legislation forbidding NASA to cooperate in any way whatsoever with Chinese space agencies. And therefore, at the moment, China's space station welcome uh, proposals from around the world in order to do the projects on Chinese space station. Not a single US proposal has been accepted yet. Another thing is about the GPS. We know that we are using American's GPS, the global position system. We are talking about global position link system. There are other systems doing the same, including one from Europe. It's called Galileo. And there's another one from Russia as well. Galileo is now almost ready to serve, okay, but not 100% running smoothly. But anyway, China indicated that we will join Galileo. And 2003, by 2007, EU found that there are lack of money to do that. And talk about investing some money, about 500 million. China happy to put forward some money. But 2008, the revised budget up to 3.4 billion, from 500 million to 3.4 billion, almost 7 times increase in budget. And then I want to give that contract to companies in Europe. So by that time, China figured out, you want my money, but you don't want me to participate. Therefore, it withdraw and then develop China's own BeiDou system. At the moment, BeiDou system is fully operational. Another story about supercomputing. Notice we are talking about high technology, good technology, technology that can be used for the benefit of whole humanity, supercomputing. By the start of 2013, a supercomputer from China, Tinker 2, becomes the fastest supercomputer in the world. And Tinker 2 take that position consecutively for 3 years, 6 evaluations. Then under Obama at that time, US forbid Intel to sell its processor to the builder of Tinker and stopping Tinker 3's development. Supercomputing, we are improving our computing abilities almost constantly. So we have Tinker 2, and by the time Tinker 2 is operational, they already start building Tinker 3. And Tinker 3 technology is based on Intel CPUs. But Obama banned Intel of selling these Xeon chips to the supercomputer builder. Again, limit the technology growth of China. In that case, okay, you don't sell me CPU, I do it myself. So by 2018, notice there's a time lapse here, okay? 2013, Tinker 2 becomes the fastest supercomputer, and it was planning on its Tinker 3. Then the ban come in 2015. It takes China another 3 years to build another one. And this time, we took the #1 position again. After this experience, China said, no, we are not going to participate in this top 500 supercomputer evaluation anymore. We do our work. Are we #1, #2? Don't care. We just do our work. We don't want to let people know how advanced our supercomputing is, because if we let you know, you will try to hinder me in my own development. So China no longer participate in this supercomputing evaluation. So we don't know what is the position of supercomputing in China now. But again, it go back to the top spot in June 2018, and it stayed there for only 1 year, and then it took over by Japan, and then later on by US again. But does it mean that China's supercomputing has stopped at this Sunray Daiwu No, it is not. It just doesn't participate anymore. And US, of course, put a lot of emphasis on limiting the Chinese chip industry. So it started in 2022, October 7, and forbid any company using any US technology to sell anything to Huawei and later on to China. So if your machine have a screw from US, sorry, you are not going to sell this machine to China because the US ban. If your machine is used for producing electronic chips. For Biden, there's no excuse needed. Biden just say, okay, we will do that. So we will jump to the internet and have a very quick look at what Biden's done. So let me prepare that page first. I think it's this page. Yes. Okay, I will stop this share and then start a new share again with my new screen. No, not the one, this one. Share screen and use, what's the look? This one. Okay, now we are looking at a web page. So Biden becomes US president in 2021. Then it said the president is planning to take a multilateral approach by enlisting the support of Western allies to maximize Washington's leverage on Beijing. Now, that is very different from the approach from Trump. Trump uses his own ability, uses trade tariffs, but Biden didn't. Biden took a different approach. We will see that very quickly. And at that time, being so frustrated with Trump, then on the second day of Trump's presidency, China announced going sanctions with 28 Trump's previous officials, including Mike Pompeo. And then on the February 5th, the top US and China diplomat meet. They talk different things when they meet, okay? Biden, Blinken, emphasis on human rights and the military coup in Myanmar, whereas China's side emphasis on stop interfering and in China's internal affairs and respect Chinese sovereignty. Now, that message has always been consistent. U.S. diplomats talk about human rights, da 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 da. Chinese side talk about mutual respect all the time. So that will be a consistent. That's another one where the two leaders meet again and U.S. emphasize on economic practice, human rights, Taiwan, China focus on mutual respect, cooperation, and dialogue. And 2000 and 2021 is still in the heat of COVID. So U.S. extended exemptions to medical products. Meeting. Now, as I said, the U.S. use a blacklist. So 5 Chinese companies are put on the blacklist by the U.S. Federal Communication Commission. And then sanctions Chinese officials, again, using human rights as an excuse. And other extensions into limiting the business license. That means the American technique is by stopping the sale of advanced technology to China. At the same time, stop Chinese company from gathering capitals from America stock market and so forth, and also limit Chinese companies' profit by stopping these companies to sell into the into the U.S. market, and force other airlines, including us, Australia, stop using Chinese technology. That means limiting the market share of China's technology company. In particular, Huawei. Huawei is the key target. Why? Several reasons. First of all, in terms of 5G patents, of all the patents related to 5G, Huawei represents about 36%. Without Huawei's patent, your 5G network will be about 80% slower than Huawei's patent allowed. And usually the rule of patent is a patent swap. That means you want to make something, and that something will depend on, say, A's patent. But I have some patent on my hand, then we will swap so that I can use your patent and you can use mine. So the main method of getting patents is using patent swap in order to do business. If you want to run a 5G network, either Nokia and Ericsson together, then they can produce a 5G network equipment, or Huawei alone can produce a 5G network equipment. But in terms of handsets, you have to depend on Ericsson and Nokia to be able to receive 5G networks on your mobile phone. So there is a very interesting twist here. Huawei basically control the infrastructure, whereas Nokia and Ericsson control the end mobile. So at that time, Huawei's mobile is not able to use 5G, although all the stations in China is using Huawei's technology. So the infrastructure of 5G in China is by Huawei, but people accessing the 5G is not using Huawei's handset. So people come up with a technique. Huawei's handset cannot have 5G, but we can put a back on Huawei's handset, which allows the handset to have 5G, because this back is from another company, which is not sanctioned by US. Very interesting twist here. But of course, eventually Huawei developed its own method of accessing 5G. And now Mate 60 is 5G capable. Not only that, it is also satellite capable. A 5G Huawei Mate 60 Pro can connect to satellites with no additional antenna. Is a very strong technology. Remember, we have SpaceX by Elon Musk. It needs a special antenna to connect to satellite, but Huawei's handset doesn't. But anyway, looking at this, it is March. Um, then there are some meetings, and then sanctions again. Now, it's all sanctions added to entity list. And then, yes, in order to compete, now we know the integrated circuit was invented in United States by Fairchild. And then, for example, Intel has its own, we call foundry, where we can convert a silicon into computer chips. So Intel and a lot of US chip makers had its own foundry. But some guys from Taiwan noticed that all this foundry is actually by itself very high tech. You have to continuously invest in order to keep in place with the demand. And therefore, they started the TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Company, which do nothing. TSMC doesn't design the computer chip. It doesn't package the computer chip. It only make the chip. So in a computer chip, there are several steps in between. First of all, you have a design. What kind of function you want on that particular computer chip. Then you give the design to your foundry, where you put that design into a silicon wafer. That silicon wafer is very fragile. You need to package it. At the same time, you need to make sure that all the functions you expected are there. So you have the testing and packaging. So there are 3 steps here, roughly, okay? The first step, design. Second, middle step, you put that design into the wafers. Finally, you have to test and package. TSMC focus on the second step. It invests approximately 20% of its revenue in research and development on continuously pushing the dimensions of your design smaller and smaller. Now we talk about several nanometers. At the moment, the best design is 3 nanometers. Nano is 10 to the power 9, negative 9. So it is 10 to the power negative 9 meters. Very thin wires. We believe TSMC is capable of producing 3 nanometers chips. And that kind of chip is being used by Apple computers. The Apples have now moved away from using Intel chips into using its own designed chips called M series. The first one is M1 and then M2. Today, Apple is selling M3 models of its computer. And we believe M3 is based on 3 nanometers produced by TSMC. The next one up from 3 nanometers is 5 nanometers. And then up is 7 nanometers. We believe that Besides TSMC, Samsung is also capable of making the 7 nanometers. And then from 7 nanometers, we have different steps, 12, 15, etc. And then at the 14 nanometers, it was believed that it will be the limit of Chinese capability of producing the chips. China cannot produce the chips with dimensions smaller than 14 nanometers. That's what we believe at, at the whole thing. Until last year, September, Huawei announced its flagship mobile phone, Mate 60 Pro. And people open up the Mate 60 Pro and discover that the chips inside there is probably a 7 nanometers instead of 14 nanometers. That means somehow Huawei have break the barrier. Of course, it's still a few steps from the 3 nanometers, okay? But it is now into the so-called very high-tech end of the whole thing. 5 nanometers at the moment, if Huawei is correct, it is 5 nanometers. That means in the world, there's only 2 companies capable of doing that. One is TSMC, and another one is Huawei. How Huawei do it, we don't know. It hasn't announced any details. But by reverse engineering, looking at chip, that's the conclusion from the on that we talk about this U.S. Strategic Competitive Act. This is to try to attract this kind of high-tech company to build foundry in United States. So the Biden administration put up some money and promised to put a subsidy for this company to build factory in US to manufacture this high standard technology chips. Of course, TSMC is now building a factory in United States. So that is another. Now, I will say this kind of act, strategic competition act, is okay. Every government help their citizens to innovate. What is not okay is that if you receive any grants from this act, you are not allowed to build factory with the scale dimension less than 14 nanometers in China. And then your product is not allowed to sell in China as well. There's a very strict requirement. Unfortunately, TSMC fall into the trap. And therefore, Huawei had to find a way to build its high-tech chips. But anyway, very quickly, we'll go through all this and we'll see that comment doesn't matter. And provide 8, okay. And then ban from buying and selling stock, limiting its money, executive order, the one, again, semiconductor manufacturing are tracking back to United States. Foreign, anti-foreign actions by Chinese. You do that, I will do that the same. So tit and tat. And G7 meeting. And we know our previous prime minister really upset China by asking for investigation into the origin of coronavirus from China. We have to investigate the origin of coronavirus, but we shouldn't limit it to China only. We should look at it in the world where this coronavirus was found. Yes, Chinese found it first. China found it first and then stopped the spread. The rest of the world didn't follow what China had done, and therefore we suffered. We lost several million, tens of millions of lives, and China lost about a few thousand. Again, G7 and then followed by NATO. Again, talking about geographic security risk. So, U.S. is using national security as an excuse and start limiting, curtail U.S. would, yeah. This again, some companies are put into the entity list. Another 23 companies are in the list. Ban all goods imported from Xinjiang. Sanctions against, okay, because the American sanctions some of the officials from Hong Kong. So China sanctions some in US as well. So take a tack. Some licenses granted, but it will be revoked later on. And Meng Wanzhou return. Yes, we talked about that. Want to limit companies dealing with 5 key technology sectors in China: artificial intelligence, quantum computing, biotechnology, semiconductors, and autonomous system, and so forth. So we see that what the America has been doing is try to limit both the market and the access of technology from the rest of the world, basically. Okay, so I will stop sharing because this is a very long list. Okay, we are right here, and then we will. So I'm not going to go through all this. And if you search my name and on YouTube, you will find my presentation, and then I will link up the web page on the description of the video, so you can have a look. So I will stop share here now, and then almost talk offhand. And then if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer some questions. So next time I will talk about how this trade war and technology war impact the whole world, hopefully. Okay. What have the Chinese done? What are the results? Just like we reviewed the trade balance this time from last week, the trade war doesn't actually doesn't work. Will technology actually work? And what will be the implications? Then that will be topic for uh, next week. So I will welcome some questions. Please unmute yourself. You have any question to ask me? Anyone? Hi, Vivery? No? Yes, please.
Standard.
Yes, please. Anyone? No?
I just said you've stunned us all.
Yeah. Well done, Albert. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, in that case, we will meet each other next week and the last talk of this term, and we'll wrap up and look at geopolitics. Of course, all the references will be available on my YouTube videos. Okay, thank you so much, and then see you next week then. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Enjoy.
Thank you, Albert. Thanks for all the work.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.